Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Thank you.
His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, Honorable Ministers, Premiers present, government officials, deans and members of the diplomatic corps, captains of industry, leaders in civil society and academia, media colleagues, distinguished guests, and our online audience, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a warm, warm welcome to the South African Investment Conference 2022. My name is Nozipho Shabalala, and it is an absolute privilege to serve you as your program director today. In 2018, President Ramaphosa committed to raising over 1.2 trillion rand worth of investments over a 5-year period. And through the annual investment conferences, the President set out the policy context and the reforms, and the private sector gave feedback and made pledges to invest. And so this 4th investment conference is building on this very momentum, providing an opportunity for government to update the business community and the investor community on policy reforms that drive investment and that drive growth. And likewise, ladies and gentlemen, today is also an opportunity for business to share progress on actualizing commitments made and to speak to future commitments as well. And so before we get started, allow me just to make 2 housekeeping announcements. We're going to be using most, if not all, of the Sandton Convention Center today. Might I kindly please appeal to all of us to observe COVID protocols and to ensure that we maintain social distancing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be moving around the venue today, and so later on in the program, I will be giving you some guidance in terms of our movements and the different floors, and I opening and welcoming remarks, it is my singular pleasure to welcome the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Ibrahim Patel, to the stage. Might we please give him a round of applause?
On behalf of the South African government, I wish to warmly welcome you to this on this beautiful day to this 4th South African Investment Conference. To all our international guests drawn from more than 40 countries, welcome to Gauteng, where 35% of South Africa's wealth is generated, the province that accounts for 5% of Africa's GDP, this cradle of humankind, where the earliest fossil record of humanity has been found, and where today much of Africa's advanced technologies and scientific and industrial research capabilities are housed. We welcome today's small businesses who provide important services to the community, large businesses who employ millions of citizens, Black industrialists and global financiers, union leaders and community delegates, manufacturers, producers of energy, miners, and filmmakers. We want your money to be invested, to build new factories, to expand mines, to develop more agricultural lands, to obtain machinery, to employ young South Africans. We have a large contingent of exporting firms present. Last year, off the back of the commodity boom, South Africa achieved a record performance, exporting 1.8 trillion rand, representing almost 1/3 of our GDP. We want to welcome the leadership of the AFDB today, represented by Dr. Adesina, who will make a pledge for the first time at the South African Investment Conference. I also want to welcome members of Cabinet who are present here today in large numbers, premiers from a number of provinces, mayors, members of parliament, economic regulators and government officials. 4 years ago, in 2018, when the world looked very different, President Ramaphosa convened the inaugural investment conference. We met again in 2019, and then in 2020, faced with the pandemic, the conference went virtual. This is the first fully physical conference in over 2 years, with 1,000 delegates here in person. Those who are present are observing social distancing protocols. In today's meeting, the President will address us by providing a broad overview of progress made on a number of policy initiatives. We will flight a documentary-type video of progress made with different projects, highlighting what companies have done since those pledges were made. But today is also about the future and what we will do. In February this year, in his State of the Nation address in the South African Parliament, President Ramaphosa outlined progress we had made with the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. He called on investors and workers and citizens to work together to develop a social delegation with investors since the State of the Nation address. We will host panel discussions on a range of areas relevant to investors and policymakers, and we have plenary sessions on the great opportunities of integrating the African market that can be unlocked through the African Continental Free Trade Area, a pivot to Africa-led growth. And within a few hours, a number of pledges will be made by investors for new investment in the South African economy. Pledges that will focus on sectors that have driven innovation, like the production of vaccines and the shift to digital services. Pledges to plug the and put the cat among the pigeons in 2018, when he challenged us to meet the target of attracting 1.2 trillion rand of new investment within a 5-year period. It got us to travel abroad to tell the South African story, to visit local construction sites where a special economic zone was being built, factories where cars and pickup trucks were rolling off the production lines, sites where anesthetic, medication and COVID vaccines were manufactured for the first time on the African continent, and film locations where movies were being produced, employing South Africans, bringing value to our economy. It helped to focus our work and the metric of success. And the person who's really catalyzed us, got us to focus on this, is the one that I want to introduce now, and I want to welcome the President of the Republic, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, call on His Excellency to officially open the conference and give the keynote address. Mr. President, the floor is
Program Director, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Premiers, Dr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, captains of industry and leaders of business organizations, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome all of you to South Africa, those who have come from far and afield, and particularly to our 4th South African Investment Conference. We meet at a time when our country, like many other countries around the world, are facing huge challenges as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Yet it is also a moment of great opportunity and promise for development, for business building, and for restoring the lives of our people. For 2 years, our world has been battered by a pandemic far worse than any experienced in more than a century. Our economy, like so many around the world, has been severely damaged. Unemployment has risen, resulting in the loss of some 2 million jobs in South Africa. Businesses have closed and families across our nation have suffered great hardship. But it could have been far worse. Had we not acted swiftly to contain transmission and strengthen our health facilities, many more people would have gotten ill and many more lives would have been lost. Had we not introduced an unprecedented social and economic relief package, many more businesses would have closed and many more jobs would have been lost, and indeed many more people would have gone hungry. Not only did these measures provide vital and needed support to those most affected by the pandemic, they also established a foundation for the recovery of our economy. Due to the decline in COVID infections, also due to the decline in hospital admissions and deaths, and thanks to the levels of vaccination and people immunity or herd immunity, as they say, we have entered a new phase in the management of the pandemic. We've been able to remove almost all restrictions on the social and economic activity, enabling our people and our businesses to almost move back to pre-COVID days. We're learning to live, we're also learning to work and to build back and reconstruct with the virus in our midst. This 4th investment conference could not be taking place at a better time, just as the country is casting off the long shadow of the pandemic and embarking on a concerted and determined recovery. We are not unaware of the challenges our country faces, and there are many. We know that our challenges are huge, they are gigantic, they are also complex, and they are also protracted. But we are neither defined by these challenges, nor are we daunted by them. Rather, we are dedicated to surely, steadily, and decisively overcoming them. And I'm not here to pretend that these challenges are not real, because they are real. I'm also not here to downplay these challenges, but I am here to share with you about what has been done and what we are doing to meet the many challenges our country faces. I'm also here to say that the government of the Republic of South Africa is making progress along the difficult but necessary path of reform that we have embarked on some 3 years ago, that we are starting to see some of the results that we envisaged. Nowhere is this difficult path more apparent than in the one sphere that really determines the life of our people and the economy of our country, which is energy. No economy can operate without a reliable supply of electricity. That is why we have undertaken the most extensive transformation of our energy sector in nearly a century. In December last year, ESCOM, our energy company, met its deadline of establishing a separate transmission entity and is set to complete the process of unbundling into separate entities for generation, transmission, and distribution by the end of this year. We are moving ahead to facilitate a competitive market for electricity generation and the establishment of an independent state-owned transmission company. We have a deficit of some 4,000 megawatts of energy supply due to the aging of our power stations and many other technical difficulties that they continue to experience. We are working with the private sector to fast-track investment to unlock a potential 4,000 of embedded generation. We have increased the licensing threshold for embedded generation projects from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatts, which has been widely welcomed by many in the business sector. Last year, we launched bid window 6 of our Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. This is going to add new generation capacity to the grid over the next 2 years, mainly through wind and solar power. And so, even as the country continues to experience intermittent load shedding, we are moving with pace and determination to bring new generation capacity online in the shortest possible time. We're doing so while undertaking the far-reaching reforms that will secure a reliable and affordable and a sustainable supply of electricity well into the future. For South Africa's economy to realize its potential as a supplier of products, goods to markets across the world, it needs roads, railways, and ports that work. While we undertake a range of measures to improve operational performance, we are also implementing structural reforms to increase investment, introduce new technologies and skills, and improve efficiency in all our rail and port infrastructure. This is work that is underway. The establishment of the Transnet National Ports Authority as a separate entity may not, at first glance, seem particularly transformational, but it is a long overdue structural reform that will have a profound effect on investment in our ports infrastructure. Transnet will soon start the process of providing third-party access to the freight rail network, a development that will encourage more efficient use of some of our country's most valuable infrastructure assets. Last week, we concluded the first significant spectrum auction in close to 2 decades. I've been told by players in that field that the auction was run along world standard rules and processes, and they just give a great deal of accolades to the way our independent communications authority ran the process. They said world class, and that is a word I always want to hear, world class. So I was very pleased. Now, this is going to unlock valuable spectrum for mobile communications that will have significant benefits for consumers, for businesses, for ordinary people, and will facilitate the development of broadband infrastructure across the country. And some of the conditionalities they have to meet is to reach out into the deep rural areas of our country, enable connectivity in the villages, in the very deep areas of our country. Soon we'll be completing the migration of our TV signal from analog to digital, unlocking much of our country's digital potential. It has taken a long time, but as they say, it's better late, a little late than never. So this is what is happening now. Our state-owned enterprises have been a huge drain on the fiscus over the years. Our reform process is aimed at bringing this to an end and making sure that our state-owned enterprises are profitable and they run properly. Like many other countries, we are transforming our entire approach to state-owned enterprises so that they are better able to fulfill their vital social as well as economic functions. We have revised our critical skills list, which will enable us to attract skilled professionals to work and to do business in South Africa. It is our ambition to be an economy and a society that is open to the global skills that attracts talent, expertise, and innovation to South Africa. We are establishing a special unit in the Presidency to deal with bureaucratic red tape that impedes the operation of good business and to improve the operating environment and to reduce the cost of doing business. These reforms are not insignificant, nor are they just superficial. They are contributing to an economy that, despite the setbacks of the last 2 years, is developing and transforming and moving forward. We can see the signs of this everywhere. We see this in Postmansback, which is a small town in the Northern Cape, where the country's largest concentrated solar-powered plant is being built as part of our Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program. That's the part of the country where it is, they say, as hot as hell. And there is a town that is called Hot as Hell. We see it in the upgrades to the passenger terminal at our Durban Harbour as part of a public-private partnership with Transnet. It can be seen at the Toyota plant in KwaZulu-Natal, where the first hybrid vehicle produced in South Africa is being manufactured. It can be seen in Cape Town, where NANT SA Vaccine Manufacturing Campus is being built. Dr. Song will be with us tonight, and he will tell us about his own origins and where he's been in the world and why he has come back home to South Africa to invest. It can be seen in Gqeberha, in the Eastern Cape, where the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing site in Africa, owned by Aspen Pharmacare South African company, which is also partly owned by workers, is producing products for domestic consumption and export of a pharmaceutical nature. These are all the places where investment commitments that have been made and announced here at previous conferences are being realized, where plants are being built, where jobs are being created, and where production is underway. We are supporting these investments with a renewed focus on expanding the country's economic and social infrastructure. We've established the Infrastructure Fund with a 100 billion rand allocation from the fiscus over 10 years to leverage blended financing from private investors and multilateral development banks for infrastructure. We have prepared a pipeline of projects in water, in sanitation, in bridges, in energy, in transport, digital infrastructure, agriculture, agro-processing, as well as human settlements. Construction on a number of these catalytic projects is underway, and many of them will be commencing later this year. A presidential climate finance task team has been established to lead the mobilization of the funds for our just transition to a low-carbon economy. This will be headed by former Reserve Bank Deputy Governor Daniel Minele, This task team will lead engagements on the 131 billion rand Just Transition Partnership with the European Union, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. This partnership will involve repurposing and repowering some of the coal plants that are reaching the end of their lives and creating new livelihoods for workers, for communities who are going to be most impacted by the change. All this work is part of the economic recovery, reconstruction and recovery plan that we put in place in October 2020 in response to the devastation to our economy by COVID-19. And it is aimed at driving growth, creating more jobs in the aftermath of the pandemic. The measures that form part of the plan underpin the social compact that we are building among social partners, and they being specifically business, labor, community, constituency, as well as government. This is a unique South African process where we sit down with all these key social players and craft agreements, and this time round we're seeking to craft a new consensus. A new consensus that will draw together the resources, the capabilities, and the efforts of all sections of society to achieve our common goal of a rapid and sustained recovery. We see this social compact in action through initiatives such as the Youth Employment Service, which is a collaboration between government and business to provide work experience and jobs to unemployed youth in our country, and there are many of them. We see it at work in the Presidential Employment Stimulus, which has provided job and livelihood opportunities for over 800,000 people in the 17 months since it was established in response to COVID-19. We see this social compact at work in our infrastructure program, in the several industries that have developed master plans to expand investment and production, and in our determined skills development programs. This is supported by a macroeconomic framework that is clear, that is stable, and that is prudent as well. We are working to steadily reduce our deficit and debt burden. And we are shifting public spending away from consumption and servicing our debt towards supporting capital investment, productive activity, yes, as well as social development. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, it is nearly 4 years since we embarked on the ambitious drive, as Minister Patel was saying, to raise 1.2 trillion rand in new investment over 5 years. Now, despite the impact of the pandemic, by the time of the third South African Investment Conference in 2020, we had raised and we had pledged a total of 774 billion rand in investment commitments. We are 2/3 of the way to reaching our target. Now, of the 774 billion committed, around 316 billion has so far been invested, and the rest is in the way of being processed. Of the 152 investment pledges, 45 projects have been completed. A further 57 are under construction. 15 have been put on hold in several cases due to the impact of the pandemic. The investments that have been realized since our first conference have created jobs, have increased localization, and have expanded local value chains. They have brought skills, they've also brought technology and know-how into our economy. Whether it is a young person employed in a data center, a worker at an auto plant, or a small business supplier to a renewable energy plant, these investments are impacting on the lives of a number of our people, and I wish it was all of our people, but there are always these limits. The chance to earn a decent livelihood is fundamental to the dignity and the worth of every human being. And it is these investments that are making the difference. Today, at this 4th South African Investment Conference, many companies, and represented by many of you here, will come forward to make new investment commitments. And we thank you for being here, and we thank you for having the investment determination to come forward and make those pledges. You will do so because you see opportunity in this country. You see beyond the difficulties and the challenges, and that is why you will come to this platform and make those pledges. You also see the reform process that is underway that is bearing fruit. You see an open society that has enabled us to weather many storms, and there have been many storms. You also see a strong and vibrant democracy, a diverse media, and an active civil society. These are enshrined also, their rights are also enshrined in our Constitution. But you also see durable institutions. You see, for you to invest, you see that there's an independent judiciary in our country and the rule of law. After a decade of state capture, you see a country that is confronting corruption and criminality, a country that is rebuilding its law enforcement agencies and strengthening the capacity of the state. You also see a well-regulated banking, financial, and taxation system and a transparent budget process in operation in South Africa. As investors, you see a constitution that enshrines the rights of employers and employees alike, that advances the rights of the landless in our country, as it does those of property owners, that protects workers and businesses, and that prevents the arbitrary exercise of power. As we continue along this path of reconstruction and recovery, I call on all investors, entrepreneurs, and business people to be part of this journey, for we have embarked on a journey of reform, a journey of recovery, and a journey of rebuilding this country brick by brick, street by street, and infrastructure project by infrastructure project. As investors, you need to know that your investments are secure and that the operating environment in South Africa is stable, and that you are supported by policy certainty and regulatory safeguards that we are putting in place. You need to know that the measures that we are taking to tackle crime and the damage to infrastructure are having an effect. Your investments are making a difference in local economies and the lives of our people. We therefore invite you to be part of South Africa's growth story. We invite you to be part of a young, dynamic, resilient nation, positioning itself at the front and at the forefront of progress and change. We are forging ahead to transform our economy, to unlock our country's potential, and to create meaningful livelihoods for all our people. Along the way, yes, there will be challenges, there will be hurdles, but we are determined to overcome. And we are determined also to leave no one behind in South Africa. I therefore invite you, as you make your pledges today, to join us in this journey, a wonderful journey of rebuilding South Africa. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an open invitation to be a part of South Africa's growth story, to be a part of a story about reforms, about reconstruction, about recovery, and about rebuilding. A big thank you to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to a special address now that we're going to hear from an African optimist. An African optimist who's not only shaping the narrative of an Africa-led growth, but is certainly proving the business case for an Africa-led growth through the African Development Bank. Please help me welcome the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akanumi Adesina.
Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, and my dear big brother, the Premier David Makhura of Gauteng Province, members of South Africa's Parliament, honorable ministers, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, business leaders, investors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. President, for such an inspiring, visionary speech loaded with incredible results. Now, please let me express my personal feeling before I start. This is a very responsive, focused, determined, and accountable president. Mr. President, you're way too modest for all of what you have achieved. And as you read out those numbers, please, I would like us to rise and really applaud him, because it's a fantastic job the president has done. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, thank you very much for the great honor and invitation to join you today and to speak at the 2022 South Africa Investment Conference. Of course, I'm delighted to be here with your junior sister, Grace. I remember in 2018 when you came up with this idea of a South Africa Investment Conference. It was at the same time that the African Development Bank and its partners were establishing the African Investment Forum here in Johannesburg. They say great minds think alike. Well, I think visionaries also do. They see the big picture of success long before others do. You are visionary. You were bold. You understood that the economy, for it to grow, South Africa needed to expand private sector investments and to create jobs. Investors responded positively. They saw an economy powered by a business-savvy president who acts like a chief executive officer, and they showed their interest and support with their checkbooks. The South Africa Investment Conference has mobilized 774 billion rands. Congratulations, Mr. President. Congratulations, South Africa. The point was made loud and clear. South Africa is bankable. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have seen President Ramaphosa in action in Africa and globally. He treats every engagement as if he is in a boardroom. He even sold some of the Ankole cows on his farm and struck hard bargains, including for Cinderella, for Zaria, and Fafa, which is sold to a family member, no discount. What a deal maker, Mr. President. President Ramaphosa, with incredulous zeal and resolute and disarming calmness, with sophisticated hands like somebody on the spindle, weaves every deal thread into beautiful investment tapestries. I can tell you, President Ramaphosa is South Africa's #1 salesman to the world. I have watched him turn adversity into business opportunity, even amid COVID-19 pandemic, as he positions South Africa as the solutions provider for vaccines. Today, the world has turned to South Africa's BioVac and Aspen Pharmacare to manufacture vaccines in South Africa. Today, thanks to his leadership and business savviness, Johnson & Johnson set up the continent's first mRNA vaccine manufacturing plant to supply 300 million doses. Not only is South Africa the leading industrialized country in Africa, it is also a pace setter. Thanks to South African scientists and leadership, Omicron was identified even before the world woke up. I watched President Ramaphosa push for waiver of trade-related intellectual property rights at the World Trade Organization to assure the production of vaccines, turning intellectual property rights to where it counts towards life, towards the production, local manufacturing of life-saving vaccines, especially in Africa. When the African Development Bank and its partners, which includes Development Bank of South Africa, Africa 50, Afri-Exim Bank, Trade and Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, the Islamic Development Bank, and the European Investment Bank organized the first Africa Investment Forum right here, right in the same place at the Sandton Center in Johannesburg. President Ramaphosa supported us fully, together with Premier David Makhura of Gauteng. He joined us as we marketed deals and projects to global investors. It was the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are. The inaugural Africa Investment Forum in 2018 brought together project sponsors from 24 countries right here in Johannesburg. In less than 24 hours, in what looked like a really breezy morning, actually, it was a little bit cold, deals warmed up the corridors of the Sandton Convention Center. Investment deals worth $38.7 billion were secured. It was a landmark for Africa. We were back right here in Johannesburg for the Africa Investment Forum in 2019, and deals worth $40.1 billion were also secured within less than 72 hours at the Africa Investment Forum. There's something about the Sandton Convention Center. I think great things happen from here. Among the deals already closed for South Africa includes a $500 million for Africa Infrastructure Investment Fund, $350 million for a beef processing project in South Africa. Among them also is a $25 billion liquefied natural gas project for Mozambique, which will make it the third largest producer of liquefied natural gas in the world. And I would like to thank you, especially, Mr. President, because that investment had some projects in the Cabo Delgado area. I want to thank you for your outstanding leadership and those of the SADC heads of state and government, and that of President Kagame of Rwanda that made it happen. The place is stable now. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And the beat goes on. Last week, the Africa Investment Forum investment boardrooms for 2021, earlier postponed due to Omicron, held virtually. With 300 investors from around the world, it was all about deals, deals, and deals. Again, within 72 hours, it secured $32.8 billion worth of investment interest for projects in Africa. This includes $15.6 billion for the Lagos to Abidjan Highway Corridor, a $3.5 billion railway project to connect Tanzania, Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda. The deals also included a $140 million health fund right here in South Africa to provide access to world-class oncology care. So in just 3 years, the Africa Investment Forum, which we started right from here, has become Africa's premier investment marketplace, mobilizing $100 billion of investment interest to Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, Africa is bankable. Your Excellencies, the African Development Bank believes in South Africa. You can see it in what we do. The bank's current portfolio of investment in South Africa totals $3.2 billion. The African Development Bank's current financing to South Africa's private financial sector amounts to 16.5 billion rands, or $1.1 billion, including support to the Development Bank of South Africa and lines of credit and trade finance facilities to leading domestic banks. The African Development Bank provided a loan of 6.2 billion rands, or $413 million, to Transnet, which His Excellency Mr. President mentioned. This has allowed Transnet to modernize its rolling stock fleet, acquire new rolling stock, and increase its freight capacity by 120%, from 80 metric tons to 176 metric tons. We provided a total of 48 billion rands, that's $3.2 billion, to the energy sector, which His Excellency Mr. President also mentioned, including Eskom's capital expenditure and the Medupi Power Project. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the bank has since gradually shifted our financing towards renewable energy. We supported the 100 megawatt Sere wind power plant with 884.9 million rands, or $69 million. We supported Zina 100 megawatts solar concentrated power plant with 1.45 billion rands. And last year, Mr. President, we financed the Redstone 100 megawatts solar project with 2.3 billion rands, or $152 million. Mr. President, I did ask you to please help us unlock or unblock the challenges being faced for this project. I was excited when you talked about the presidential unit in your office. You did, and you brought it back on track. Your intervention, Mr. President, paid off. 8 days ago, the Redstone Solar Project was awarded the African Renewable Deal of the Year by the prestigious IJ Global Journal. Congratulations again. We supported the Medupi coal power plant. We will now move to support the drive towards renewable energy strongly in South Africa as you drive towards net zero emissions. Mr. President, I salute your leadership and commitment in driving energy transition for South Africa. As South Africa moves towards energy transition, the African Development Bank will strongly support your efforts. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, net zero cannot be achieved with zero financing. The African Development Bank is preparing a 6 billion rand support, which will be $400 million, towards the support of Eskom in its transition to renewable energy. I applaud the G7 countries for their commitment of $8.5 billion to South Africa's just energy transition. Mr. President, the African Development Bank, working in partnership with international partners, especially the G7 countries, plans to establish a just energy transition facility that will support South Africa to raise at least $27 billion to support its energy transition into renewable energy. We will do it, Mr. President, without South Africa getting into debt, and that's very important. This will transform South Africa into a global leader in energy transition. It will move South Africa away from coal into renewable energy. It will reduce pollution and negative externalities of impacts of carbon emissions on health and the environment. It is an excellent opportunity to recalibrate the Southern African economy, to generate thousands and thousands of green jobs, empower new green industries for a more competitive economy for South Africa. Mr. President, you can count on the African Development Bank. We will help you to make it work. We promise, we deliver. Mr. President, because you are also a big shareholder of the African Development Bank, it's important for me to say to you and to South Africans that you can be proud of the African Development Bank, your bank. In 2021, the African Development Bank was ranked the best multilateral financial institution in the world by Global Finance, the renowned US financial magazine. The African Development Bank strongly supports South Africa's investment conference, from energy to infrastructure, the establishment of agro-industrial parks, to support to the private sector, small and medium-sized enterprises, to create jobs for the youth especially, as you said, Mr. President. We will provide robust support. Your Excellency, Mr. President, I'm therefore delighted to announce that the African Development Bank will commit 42.5 billion rands, that's $2.8 billion, to South Africa over the next 5 years. This financing will support public and private sector investments in priority areas that you have laid out of agriculture, renewable energy, transport, youth employment, health, vaccines manufacturing, among others. We know South Africa is bankable. Your Excellency, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the African Development Bank will be by your side as South Africa powers its economy forward for a more glorious future, a greater and better future, with quality jobs for South Africa's youth, a greater and better future for South Africa's resilient women. Yes, for South Africa's youth and women, because when the youth and the women win, South Africa wins. I believe in South Africa. If you believe in South Africa, say I do. Thank you very much.
President Adesina, I think the I do was a little bit muted. I think let's try it again. Ladies and gentlemen, I do. I think that was a little bit better. A big thank you to the President of the African Development Bank. Africa is bankable, ladies and gentlemen. South Africa is bankable. The AFDB believes in South Africa, and that's reflected in a 42.5 billion rand investment, the equivalent of $2.8 billion US. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on in our program now, we are going to be moving into a panel discussion that is really going to be digging deep and delving into the South African investment case. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome the moderator of this session, and that is Madame Mamuke Delijane. She's a macroeconomist at Absa Capital. And to also invite her panelists as she comes up as well, it's my singular pleasure to welcome Mr. Mark Kutifani onto stage, the CEO of Anglo-American PLC, to welcome Madame Puti Mahanyele Dabengwa, the South Africa CEO for Naspers, as well as Mr. Adrian Gore, the founder and CEO of Discovery Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a warm welcome as they make their way onto stage.
us know when they sort it. Okay.
Well, you'll know when your voice is coming out.
Yeah.
You want me to say something? I can yell.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It sounds
Oh,
like
we're right.
it sounds like we're live. Is everybody else? Can you?
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Hello. I think we're live.
Are we live? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending this august occasion. And good morning to all the dignitaries, the president, government officials, diplomatic people. I'm going to just align my, my greetings to those that have been made before. I think they would be delivered, or they have been delivered much more eloquently than what I can manage. But welcome to this, this occasion, and thank you for having myself, as well as the people that are standing next to me to speak to you this morning. So my name is Mamukete Dijane. I am an economist and a strategist at ABSA CIB. To my left, I have got Mark Tufani, who is the outgoing CEO of Anglo American. And to his left is Putu Mahanya Ledebengwa, the CEO of Naspers South Africa. And on the extreme left is Adrian Gore, who's the CEO of Discovery Limited. So mine is really, or ours is really to sort of substantiate or bring businesses' view to all the infrastructure investment view that has been put in place today and put forward by the president, as well as the CEO of the African Development Bank. So without further ado, I think my first job is to sort of scale or outline the investment environment in South Africa, or at least the performance of investment to date. And I'm just going to have a very brief overview, starting in 1994, when democracy started. I think the story of investment and investment growth in South Africa has been one that can be characterized in waves. So post-apartheid, you had the opening up of markets, the liberalization of quite a few industries, and you had quite a bit of dynamism coming through into that period. I think if you look at where investment numbers go, you started off, say, from 13, we're currently at 13% of GDP, GFC, and that is really low compared to global standards. So if you look at our global peers, you can see China at around 48% of GDP, investment to GDP, and you've got on the one hand, and on the low end, you've got Brazil at around 16%, and then you have South Africa at 13%. So clearly South Africa is really far down as far as that metric is concerned. What we have to think about, though, is that an opportunity, or is that, so, or in a nutshell, I think what I'm trying to say is, what you see is a number that looks like it's behind its peers, but it also, I think, outlines how big the opportunity is for investment growth in South Africa. We've had a decade that has been pretty difficult. I think if you look at investment growth in the 10 years to 2021, growth was very miserable, or it was actually a contraction on average over the decade of about 3%. And I think that really sets the stage, and it says to us, we've got quite a bit to do, but also within that, it means that there is quite a lot of runway that we can exploit, and opportunities that are probably remain on the table. So without me taking up a lot of time, I'd like to really speak to the people that make the investment decisions, make the capital allocation decisions, and ask them in their estimation, where do they think the South African investment story is for themselves, their companies, and for business in general. So to start off with, I'm going to start with the oldest corporates of the three that I've got in front of us. The one that was established the earliest, and I was surprised when I realized that that company was actually Naspers. So I'm going to start with Phuthi. So Phuthi, your business is one that started off in media and moved on to what is essentially now consumer, internet consumer and fintech. Where do you see the opportunities for yourselves and how do you see South Africa relative to Naspers at this time?
Thank you very much for the question, and good morning, Mr. President. Thank you very much for having us. What we have seen, I think when you look at Naspers, we have been a business that has moved from being a media business to now being a 100% consumer internet business globally. And we have done that through the support of our stakeholders and particularly our shareholders. Our largest shareholder is the PIC, and as you know, the PIC is the asset manager for the Government Employees Pension Fund. And from that perspective, through having these shareholders who are long-term shareholders, it has enabled us to be able to grow and to grow quite exponentially. And so today we are a business that is operating beyond South Africa in 100 markets around the world, and serving 2 billion consumers. And so from that perspective, we have seen how we've been able to scale significantly. I think when I look at our business, what really gives me a lot of encouragement, and having listened to the speeches earlier as well, is the importance of us continuing to invest locally in South Africa. And so from that perspective, what we have looked at is how our businesses locally are supporting South Africans and growing South Africans. So if I look at, for instance, the Naspers Foundry, which we started actually when the President's Investment Conference started, when we pledged, and that portion was 1.4 billion rand of the portion that was pledged that year. But that 1.4 billion rand went into the Naspers Foundry, which is enabling early stage tech investors to be able to invest into a number of businesses that have been able to scale beyond South Africa. And I can give you examples. We have businesses such as Sweep South, which provides domestic cleaning services. Today, Sweep South is, a business that is not only operating in South Africa, they're operating in Nigeria, in Egypt, and in Kenya. If I look at a business such as, there's an agri-tech business that we invested into, Aerobotics, and they not only operate here in South Africa, but they're operating in the US as well. We've invested into insurtech businesses. An example is Naked. And Naked is a business that is making insurance affordable for its consumers. And so the reason that I look at entrepreneurs is the fact that if we didn't have access to, capital that is there in the long term, it would have been difficult for us to be able to grow sustainably. But in addition to that, what is important is the fact that South Africa has these entrepreneurs who are very capable of growing successful businesses. And so we are very keen in supporting these entrepreneurs in South Africa to be able to scale, and globally as well. And in addition to that, we are also looking at supporting our youth here in South Africa. And, South Africa being a country that has got a very youthful, population, we are providing digital skilling to our youth. And so we've set ourselves a target to ensure that by 2024, we are able to provide digital skilling and employment to 10,000 youth. And so from that perspective, we've been doing that. And just in this past year, in fact, we provided digital skilling to 2,000 young people and employment to 1,600 young people. And this is part of us paying it forward. If you look at our existing businesses, Take a Lot is a business that is providing, small and medium-sized entrepreneurs with the platform to be able to operate their businesses. And when you look at the business today, we have 5,500, entrepreneurs who are on that platform and are able to continue doing business, and we're able to do that through COVID because they are on the platform. In addition to that, Take a Lot is employing a number of drivers as well. I think it's about 20,000 drivers that we employ. And that's through Mr. D and of course other parts of Take a Lot and Superblist and others. But, so we look at all forms of being able to work with South African small businesses to enable them to be able to scale and become significant businesses globally. That is what we are focused on.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that, Puti. I'm going to move on to the second oldest business on this particular platform, which is Anglo-American. That was a bit of a twist because I would have thought that Anglo-American was the older business, but here we are. But Mark, yours is like a behemoth of an institution, which has mining investments in multiple jurisdictions in every single mineral that matters, pretty much in every geography that matters within the mining space. And it has its origins in this country, and it's still a very big and very meaningful company in this country. What is the Anglo story? What do you see as the Anglo story with respect to South Africa, with respect to the challenges of investment and the opportunities that exist here?
Well, thank you very much. It's always interesting to compare the Naspers story and the Anglo-American story in terms of the industries we're in. They're so very different, but in many ways the work we do is equivalent in terms of its criticality to how we support the world, how we support things that happen and things that people make and do, and most importantly, how it supports people. And from our perspective, we often talk about mining driving 45% of the world's economy, and we make the things that literally make the world work. So that's always an important piece of context I start with. In Anglo-American's case, we're a global company of our global earnings, and a fairly similar amount in terms of our capital deployment and new infrastructure. And in fact, in terms of the capital commitment we made back in 2018, we said about 85 billion rand is what we would spend on a 5-year basis going forward. We've actually achieved that after 4 years, and we'll be talking about the new targets a little bit later today, but very important. And again, the story is about people. So investing in infrastructure, the policy settings that the country is setting up and still developing, it continues to develop, as all countries should. Very important for us in terms of having the certainty, being able to deliver a return to shareholders, but at the same time, we have to be able to deliver a return to communities, to our employees, and make sure we're making a difference in their lives, because if we're not a sustainable business. And in our particular case, there's an interesting statistic that I always look at for businesses, and in 2013, we were spending about 2% of our gross revenue on technology, new innovation, exploration, research and development. Today we're closer to 10%. And a great bulk of that expenditure is actually based here in South Africa. And most of our technical group, our global head of technology, has his team based here. And this is where we're doing most of that work. And it touches on the new energy transition work that you'll hear a bit more about. It touches all parts of our business, but it's also about investing in new infrastructure that communities will use, that schools can use in terms of helping them provide more efficient and effective education. So we touch every part of the community, and in particular in mining, where we're so visible in those locations, and the impact we have on communities is so visible. The work we need to do with our communities is absolutely critical, and being a supporter of developing those communities, capacitation, regional, collaborative develop, are all programs that for us go with these investments, and certainly from our point of view, it's about being a partner with South Africa in the future. So, Mr. President, Minister, you have our absolute commitment to be a partner in the long term, and for everyone here in the audience and in South Africa, we're here for the long term. We're investors in the future, and it's about people and making sure that we're making a real difference for the country.
Thanks for that. And now we move on to the new kid on the block. The company that was founded in 1993, it was, Adrian. Right, so, and it's the youngest of the companies represented here. So, Discovery is a very interesting business. It's very much a new age kind of business, which is weird to say 93, and it's very much, it's a new age tech, the use of technology to enhance the delivery of product. You started very much in financial services linked to healthcare, and you've now expanded your footprint beyond just medical aid into banking, and you expanded your business beyond South Africa globally as well. And again, it's that story of a South African company that has gone out to do really interesting things in South Africa as well as globally, transformative. And how do you see yourselves right now relative to South Africa and relative to the investment story and the investment push that we have domestically?
Well, it's a complex question. I would say to you that interestingly, our business model started out of solving particular South African problems. You know, too few doctors, very high levels of disease burden, and our kind of insight of could you make people healthier, and in that process create a sustainable insurance model, and that's what we did. It turns out that applies to all different kinds of financial services, and it's globally applicable, and I think post-COVID even more so. So, you know, we have always been pretty clear. We're a proudly South African company. We really hope strongly that we are seen as an exemplar of what can be achieved through entrepreneurship, through a South African skills-based, South African capital. We're an entirely South African-built company, but we're global now in 30 markets. The model is highly applicable, and it's great for society. There's no downside at all. So we're trying our best to expand it as much as possible. But I guess an important point to make is that the bulk of our capital investment is back in South Africa. So while we're globally expanding, the capital-heavy stuff we're doing is here in South Africa. The return on capital is excellent. The scale of the market is big, and we're investing a huge amount, probably 3 billion or up a year, on new business and new businesses in South Africa. The bank itself is a big investment. So our hope is that we can obviously be globally successful. We can be an example about what South African companies can do, and we can illustrate, I think, very clearly that capital invested here earns a superior return, and the scale is remarkable. So we are, as you know, deep at work, fighting hard in the trenches with our competitors, but very proudly South African, and a strong belief that we can make a real difference socially and financially. And I think what's maybe important is what comes out of often complexity in South Africa, the solutions become applicable both here and globally. So, you know, we are focused on that and excited about what we can do for our country.
I think just to follow up on that, I mean, it's a follow-up question of what the last statement that you just made. You know, the president has outlined, and the presidency in general, they've outlined this quite expansive reform agenda, and we often, you know, complain that they're not moving fast enough. What do you think we as business can do on our end to expedite some of those reforms to the extent that it's within our sphere of influence and control, and also, you know, to take advantage for our shareholders and our stakeholders of those reforms as they come in?
You're asking. Well, I think that one of the strengths of the reforms is that there doesn't seem to be much disagreement. You know, organized business together with the presidency and social partners have laid out 6 distinct kind of work streams, and there's no ambiguity. We have to get them done and done quickly. I think we need to deliver. I don't think there's debate about the actual work streams. I think we need to expedite, move quickly, and execute. We've set, and the President has laid this out, this 100-day target. We need to get that in place. We need to get work streams on the ground, people accountable. So I actually think there's not much debate. We need to execute. I think there's no shortcut whatsoever. I think business can and must be a critical part of helping government in that regard. Discovery and many others here were party to the vaccine rollout. I think it is an incredibly powerful example of what business and government can do together. You know, from something that was seen to be intractable, we could never do it, we did it very quickly. So our view is get this done quickly.
Okay. And one question for you, Phuthi. So you have businesses, Naspers, all over the continent. You're on the continent. You're on a lot of in a lot of other emerging markets. You're in India. You're in China, and there must be some learnings that you can take from your experiences in other locales that could be useful for South Africa. Is there anything that you would point out to as particularly salient, and
Yes,
useful?
Sure. No, thank you very much. I think we have learned and continue to implement the learnings that we've received from countries such as China, India, and other countries. And one thing that I can say is the fact that collaboration is something that has been very helpful for us in our growth. And so if I look at the work that we're doing in Naspers Labs, we're doing work with the CETAs, which are very helpful in us being able to provide the skilling and employment of youth as well. So working closely with them. And then also, I think beyond that, the President mentioned that, the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies has, now launched the spectrum allocation, which was launched so successfully. And I think when you look at that, I mean, this is a minister who's been in her portfolio for less than a year, and she's already done this. And, it just shows you the capability that is there within the cabinet of South Africa. And I'm just so proud as a South African to be able to look at her and say, this is somebody who is showing direction for where technology can take us. And I really think that as South Africa, we are in such a great position to be able to position ourselves as a country that can really play a significant role just through looking at an area such as producing digital skills. Using our youthful population to produce digital skilling and being able to play a significant role in the digital market. Because right now, we still continue to be a net importer of skilling, but we have the capability to become a net exporter of those skills. And there are many different areas, but what we found is that in working closely with government, it really helps us a lot. I mean, just yesterday, I was engaging with the Deputy Minister of Higher Education. And, that type of collaboration is really, really helpful in being able to formulate, solutions that are helpful. It's in having private sector and public sector organizations working together. So that is what we are doing, and that is what is really helping us.
Mark, the world is a very complex place. And just when you think you've dealt with one problem, another one emerges. So we're sort of at the tail end of the COVID shock, we think. Commodity prices have been extremely strong, but it's questionable how long that will continue to be the case. You've now got conflict in Russia with Ukraine. You've got the Chinese property market, which is wobbly, and you don't quite know where that's going to end up. You've got the Fed and other central banks tightening monetary policy, and that could have profound implications for the